Hey and welcome to Freelance Game Dev, a small series where we design custom ideas for a pre-existing game. Today my brother and I opted for a game that we play religiously and yet always leave in a foul mood at the end of the session. Perhaps it's a form of Stockholm Syndrome. I'm of course referring to the Smash Bros of horror, Dead by Daylight. Now, every time we play, my brother and I are usually discussing game implementations we'd like to see, such as a new perk idea or installing faulty wiring in all Spirit Main's keyboards. But recently, we challenged ourselves to put our money where our mouths are and try and design a chapter of our very own, complete with killer, survivor, map, and 6 perks to go with the characters. If you're a fan of Dead by Daylight, make sure to let us know how you'd feel about these ideas and whether or not you'd want to be face-camped by our special little friend. We decided to call this chapter From the Deep, and it intends to fill the void of horror that I can't get enough of, Lovecraftian or cosmic horror, specifically inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's Shadow over Innsmouth and the deep ones that reside therein. Freaky fishmen worshipping antediluvian things that sleep in the bottom of the sea. So for now, let's look at the ideas and then we'll go further into his design and lore. This is Elias Delmer, or in his killer alias, the Fisherman. Elias was a fairly normal lighthouse worker nearing the turn of the century in 1890s Wales. At 42 years of age, he was not much of an active man, commonly sitting atop the lighthouse where he worked and watching the ships and tides as they passed him by. Often he would while away his nights like this. That is until one day, Elias saw another light in the sea, far brighter than the beam that rhythmically swept over his head. Even from as deep as it seemed to be in the Black Sea in the distance, a strange alien green colour. Elias found himself captivated, telling his fellows of the odd thing that he'd seen in the dead of night, to very few people's notice. For many nights, Elias would continue to watch atop his lighthouse, and for many nights he would fall deeper into his obsession with this thing, a thing which seemed to call to him without words. Glowing bright and moving through the sea in the far distance just as no boats were around, and then disappearing as the lighthouse beam swoops overhead. Eventually, the increasingly desperate and obsessed Delmer managed to persuade a whaling ship to assist him in his hunt. For a hefty price. Activating his lighthouse before setting sail, Elias had the lights of the boat snuffed out as they drew close to the spot where the thing seemed to emerge each night in order to sneak close enough for a proper sighting. As they sat in the black of night, all his shipmates had finally written Elias off as a madman, only for them to be silenced by the inescapably bassy rumble of something under the water, which stripped them of their breath and almost blinded them in a flash of bright, incandescent sea green light. The boat rocked violently as the thing seemed to move closer to the surface, and Elias lost his footing, lying prone as his once skeptical shipmates rushed to the edges of the boat to gawk at what they had seen below, only to scream as they did and fall mad singing and crying and wailing. All the men that looked would go through the stages of crazed grief, always ending in the men throwing themselves from the ship and into the bright light below. Elias, still just as foolish and desperate as the rest of the crew, clamoured to try and see what the others had, only to be stopped by the few sane individuals still on the boat, holding him down until the bright yellow beam of the lighthouse back at the shore bathed them and silenced the bassy hum of the sea thing. The crew breathed a sigh of relief. The thing seemed to avoid the light and so receded to the sea once more, and yet not a sound from those overboard. All was silent, bar the angry yells of Elias, chastising the men for ruining his chance to see his white whale, so to speak. The remaining men sailed hastily back to shore, but as they arrived, Elias managed to slip away from his restraints, rushing to the lighthouse and smashing the light in an attempt to bring back the horror. It worked. As Elias sat there watching the light grow in size and intensity as it rushed towards shore, Elias grabbed his emergency oil lamp and quickly descended the steps, hearing the screams of men and women below. Finally arriving to the beach, he saw it fully. The thing, his white whale, a glowing, indescribable mixture of mammal and fish, tentacle and eyes and gills, the thing lay beached and seemingly unable to move. Elias paid no notice to the lack of surrounding people at the empty fishing hamlet, gripping a jagged spear as he let his madness consume him, and he began to bleed the thing and take pieces of it. Blubber, meat and bioluminescent appendages, harvesting it all and leaving nothing for the gulls. Eating its meat, Elias would become something inhuman, taking on more aquatic aspects and growing well beyond natural limits of humanity. His lantern, which he had used to maneuver his now empty hamlet, powered by the oil secreted by the thing, created a sea-green glow that revealed all manner of things. Elias continued mutating and using the many parts of the thing, until one day, when he was lured into the sea by another light, walking into the black waters without fear until he was completely submerged, never re-emerging again. That's his lore. Now we'll discuss gameplay. The Fisherman is a very standard killer with 115% movement, 32 meter radius and the standard size for a killer. His ability is where he becomes special. It goes as follows. Lens of Truth. The lantern which you carry with you revealed all manner of things in the fog of the real world, and now it reveals your prey here. When using your ability, the fisherman will hold the lantern in front of him, breathing heavily and moving at 105% movement with slower turning ability. When shining the light in a direction, you can see the auras of survivors behind objects within the cone in a max distance of 20 meters. You become undetectable after 3 seconds of use and can make a lunge attack in this state. Survivors can also see your beam, and when shined directly at a survivor, they slowly become blinded as if from a flashlight. Basically, I wanted a killer that can work much like Scratched Mirror Myers. He's all about finding survivors as they try to hide, and showing a chase is hard to avoid. Additionally, by shining it at people, he can make looping difficult or cause them to act rashly to avoid it. He also, of course, has add-ons to improve his abilities. We didn't design them all, just 2 of each rarity level, and those are Iridescent Glowing Appendage. When shining your light at a survivor directly for 5 seconds, they become exposed for 5 seconds. Iridescent Whale Oil. Your lantern is always activated, you cannot become undetectable by wielding it. You move at 110% speed, and other add-ons cannot increase this speed. Very rare, Thing's Blubber. Causes you to move and turn considerably faster when holding your lantern. Very rare, Jar of Glowing Water. Shining your lantern at a survivor through a wall causes them to become oblivious for 10 seconds after you lower the lantern. Rare, Fog-Filled Lens. Survivors are blinded slightly faster when shining your lantern directly at them. Rare, Deformed Fish Head. You make no noise while wielding your lantern. Uncommon, Jar of Seawater. Shining your lantern at a survivor through a wall causes them to become oblivious for 5 seconds after you lower your lantern. Uncommon, Whale Blubber. Causes you to move and turn moderately faster while holding your lantern. Common, Tin of Sardines. You move and turn slightly faster when holding your lantern. Common, Melted Candle. Your lantern is always emitting a visual beam for survivors. Gain plus 100% blood points in the Deviousness category. His perks also try to fit in with his themes, and those are as follows. Blind Leading the Blind. Even after escaping, the light still haunts you. When a survivor heals themselves or is being healed 30, 60, 90 seconds after being struck by a primary attack, both the healing and healed survivor suffer from blindness and obliviousness. This effect activates when the survivor begins to be healed, and deactivates once they are fully healed or after the timer ends. Hex Bigger Fish. When a survivor is downed, any survivors within 6, 9, 12 meters of them has their aura revealed. The downed survivor is healed 10% faster. Hex End of Times. It is already too late to flee. The thing is roused. Once the final generator is finished, this hex totem activates and the endgame collapse begins, lasting 140, 130, 120 seconds. Destroying this totem removes the timer if the gates are not yet opened, and has no effect if the gates are open. So that's his perks. Overall, we like the idea of his perks. Maybe some numbers need to be tweaked, but the general ideas are all hopefully something that can work with a build. Now, what about survivors? I decided to keep the Lovecraft theme here as well, opting for a character archetype of the socially anxious genius. This is Howard Phillips, an extremely multi-talented but cripplingly afraid Londoner. Perfect pickings for the entity to bring into its realm. His general backstory is that he had an upbringing of isolation and high expectations. Even when he was at the top of his class, he was expected to be better. This caused him to become extremely sensitive and avoid social altercations as much as possible. Until one day, when the nightmares began. Nightmares of the sea and the things therein. Perhaps due to his sensitive mind, he began receiving odd visions or communications from something. Until one day, Howard was driven to the place in his dreams, an old defunct fishing hamlet by the sea in Wales. Visiting this place, he saw something upon the beach, and it was there that he had his last memories of the real world. Howard Phillips has 3 perks. Fueled by Fear. Nothing focuses you more than a fear of death. When in the killer's terror radius, you interact with gens, exit gates, and hex totems plus 1% faster for every meter into the terror radius you are, to a max of 10, 20, 30%. Happy Place. You retreat into your mind, making yourself disappear from reality. When crouching and not moving or doing any actions for 7, 6, 5 seconds, this perk activates. Your aura cannot be detected and grunts of pain are reduced by 100%. You also slowly turn darker and darker the longer you're in the state. Fight or Flight. When running in the killer's terror radius, you move at 125% your normal running speed for 5 seconds. Fight or Flight causes the exhausted status effect for 60, 50, 40 seconds. Cannot be used when exhausted. Overall, his shtick is being more of a coward than Dwight, but managing to use his fear as fuel. We had a couple other ideas for perks, but they ended up being very whack, such as Fleeting Madness. Your weak mind cannot handle this place and seeks relief. During the trial, your character will scream every 20, 30, 40 seconds, creating a visual cue for the killer, double survival points and boldness points at the end of a trial. We also had traumatic memories. You have a fear of never being good enough. When doing generators or healing, good skill checks count as great skill checks, but hitting them causes you to scream and create a visual cue for the killer. Basically, I like the idea of you revealing yourself for a big reward, not unlike Objective Obsession. But we instead opted for the other ideas, and I'm sure you'll agree that they're more fitting. Lastly is the map. Known as the Mariner's Yard, this is the fishing hamlet Elias lived prior to being taken away, and where Howard went before he disappeared. It would be a unique map with a few features that differentiate it from others. For a start, there's a shallow water that you can walk through. This is a dangerous idea as the sloshing will very much give away your sneaking as a survivor, but the waves would also act as noise pollution to make killers' hearing a bit harder too. So breathing or grunts may be harder to notice. Alongside this, specific points of interest would be a boat in the harbour with a generator on it, and the iconic lighthouse with a long spiral staircase that leads to the generator. Don't worry though, you can always vault off and down the stairs if the killer is coming. And that's it. How do you like the idea? OP? Too weak? Let us know in the comments, and if you really like the idea, maybe like and share the video, perhaps even tag Behaviour, we'd love for them to take a peek. And if you want more similar things, give us a follow on our socials. We're also developing a game if you want to help us become actual game devs. Thanks to our patrons on this more self-indulgent project of ours, that's You Lose Some, Jessodoodles, Natalie Layton, Venomous Squirrel, Corval, and my mum. Thanks, Mum.